So that's one way that they will deal with people in the media. This gets us around to this Meghan Murphy thing, where Meghan Murphy claims to be getting, treated poorly by the media. But if you do Google search for Meghan Murphy, you're going to get something like hundreds of stories basically over the last couple of months on Meghan Murphy, and most of those stories that I've seen are either neutral or positive. Okay, now Meghan Murphy and team want to focus on the isolated examples like this, forget her name, something or another off from CBC, who did a sort of scathing story, but that was used by Jonathan Kay, and it was used by Meghan Murphy as an illustration of how the media was treating her. But that's not the way the media was treating her. The media has been giving her rather glowing reviews. But the thing is that if the media is focusing on you in any other way than how they focused on me, right, which was in the negative way, then they are focusing on you, in my opinion, because either you are on board with whatever the elite agenda is, or that you and your views are useful to whatever that agenda is. Okay, so we talked about this previously on one of my podcasts, that the reason Morgan Auger says that he's willing to debate Meghan Murphy but not debate me is because Meghan Murphy's focus is very narrow. Okay, so she doesn't get into some of the most sensitive areas. Okay, yeah, the whole man is a woman thing is a sensitive issue. And she does a very good job addressing that issue. I'd say she's a little weak on language. We saw this in the recent talk she gave at the Pan-Pacific in Vancouver, where Jonathan Kay was saluting Morgan Auger and referring to Auger as her and she and all of this stuff.
So in the interest of creating dialogue, I would like to salute you, Morgan. Thank you for coming. Thank you for asking your question. You asked it in a spirit of respect, and thank you for doing that. And I think you deserve an answer. When Morgan says that gender is a protected class in Canada and this is ensconced in law, she's absolutely right. I mean, this is one of the reasons that Meghan does what she does. Meghan and other people who work in this area are doing what activists do all the time. They're looking for policy and legislative and regulatory changes. And it is absolutely true when it is said, well, the law is on the side of this or the law is on the side of that. A lot of the activism is based on changing the law. We change laws all the time in all sorts of areas, and there is this narrative in the media that there are some kinds of laws you can't change because we only go in one direction on certain things. That's actually not true at all. Sometimes you enact a law with good intentions, you see that it has some adverse effects, so you finesse the law because since the French Revolution, we have been responding to empirical evidence in a spirit of rationalism rather than dogma and superstition. And I also want to say that, so Morgan, I disagree with much of what you put on Twitter, but Morgan is an activist. The job of any activist is to state her cause in a maximalist way. Wait a sec. All activists do this. It is the job of other people in society, editors, lawmakers, judges, human tribunal adjudicants. It is their job to balance the claims made by different activists in a sensible and humane and non-dogmatic way. They are the people who deserve criticism. The people who are activists and who state their cause in a maximalist way, Morgan is doing her job. Her job. It doesn't do you any good to be gratuitously impolite. I've admitted that. But if you want to create dialogue, if you want people to take you seriously, be polite, be respectful. She came into a hostile room, stood up and asked a question. I've been on the other side of this interaction. It's not fun. I've been in rooms where people respected me for asking dissenting questions, and I've had the opposite experience. Which do you think changes more minds? Being respectful changes more minds. And I know, by the way, and I know it is hard for people in this room. For months they've been screamed at, they've been called TERF, they've been called Holocaust deniers, every single kind of abuse. It happens all the time. And so when the opportunity presents itself to give it back because you have the advantage, you want to take that opportunity. Don't. Don't do it. Be better than that.
Meghan didn't really say anything about that whole incident at the time it was transpiring anyway. Had I been on that panel, I would have been all over Kay in a second. But it sort of shows, again, that Meghan's focus is very narrow. Okay, no, I'm not criticizing what Meghan says per se and her goals, although I don't know what her goals are specifically. Like, well, I don't know that she has an action plan. I have sort of an action plan for what I'm doing. So I'm not sure what Meghan has in terms of an action plan. But the areas that she focuses on very well. The thing is, again, that she's very narrow in her focus. So she doesn't talk about big pharmaceutical companies and their role in shaping public opinion around transgender issues, or the cosmetic industry for that matter. And she doesn't focus on Soji 123. So she can be used. Now, I believe that there was a sort of a fallback agenda in place all the time. So I think the extreme sort of self-ID thing was never the ultimate goal. So I think we're seeing a rollback, and that rollback seems to be compatible with Meghan Murphy's view of the world. But these other issues are very important, and they need to be discussed. Unfortunately, Meghan has pretty much decided that my issues don't need to be discussed, and that what I'm trying to do shouldn't be mentioned. And let me just show you how that works. I'm going to switch screens here. And people wonder why I got frustrated with Meghan. Again, I want people to be clear that most of what Meghan Murphy is saying and doing, I agree with. Okay, well, the problem I have with Meghan Murphy is that she is, I think, essentially trying to erase me or keep me as low visibility as possible. And I'll show you how that works right here. Okay, so if you go to the Feminist Current website, let's do that. And we'll do a couple of things. So Meghan Murphy has been in this battle as long as I have, and been dealing with the issues. She maintains that she's doing this from a feminist perspective, which is fine. But I have been focusing on the same things and have been subject to like a far greater censorship than Meghan Murphy has experienced. And it would be nice, since she knows that my goals are to return women's rights and stuff to them, but I'm also concerned about these vulnerable kids and what's going on in our schools. It'd be nice if she actually acknowledged my existence. But when you go to the Feminist Current website and say, do what they call an exact search for Jenn Smith, there we are, I'll show you what you get. Doing an exact search here. You get basically 0 results. The only result that you get is this one here, which was essentially a petition. And the only reason I come up at all on the Feminist Current website is because I signed this petition, because I used to support Meghan Murphy actively. I went to her talk at the library in Vancouver in January. When she got kicked off Twitter, I was saying it was an outrage, and I was spreading the story. So for the most part, I have supported Meghan. But we've been in this battle together for 2 or 3 years, And this website has been active for 2 or 3 years, and yet in those 2 or 3 years, there has been 0 references to Jenn Smith, who is active in the same province as her, and who is actively trying to prevent schools from conditioning children into accepting transgender ideology. You'd think she would throw me a mention, but she doesn't, and it gets worse. I can show you that later. The other thing to understand here, and it's one of the other things that Meghan Murphy does not address. There we go. The other thing that Meghan Murphy doesn't address is SOGI 123. Now, people can debate as to, why should Meghan address SOGI 123? It's a non-issue. I would say that the reason she needs to address SOGI 123 is because all of the issues that she's fighting for, or ostensibly fighting for, in terms of protecting women's rights, which again I agree with, that's all fine, great, and needs to be done. But the idea of boys going into women's safe spaces and stuff, change rooms, at the shower or at the swimming pool, or women's shelters and stuff like that, and boys taking part in women's sports and stuff. So she's against those things, right? And SOGI 123 actually is conditioning kids to support all of those things, and it's recommending that teachers actually actively facilitate these things that she says are unfair. So why she would ignore, and let me just prove this to you. So let's just go to her website again, and let's do an exact search for SOGI 123. See what we get. Sorry, but nothing matched your criteria, and I've gone through this. So Meghan Murphy does not address SOGI 123, even though SOGI 123 has kind of been recognized as a sort of sinister transgender ideology program, not just in BC, but around the globe. It's recognized for that. And she lives in BC. Okay, she lives like 45 minutes from me, and yet she, in all of her time, and all the time that SOGI 123 has been here, she has not written about it even once, nor has any of her staff writers. It's more than just the fact that SOGI 123 is conditioning the next generation to reject everything Meghan Murphy is saying and what I'm saying. It's worse than that. What they're doing, while Meghan Murphy completely ignores SOGI 123, is they are creating an army of young, what they call turf haters. Okay, so transgender, exclusionary, radical feminists. So essentially, a new generation of people who will hate TERFs are being conditioned right now, while Meghan's off in New Zealand doing whatever she's doing in New Zealand. Again, what she's doing is good, but she needs, in my opinion, to broaden her focus. But she doesn't have to, okay? So I don't even necessarily expect her to broaden her focus to include the insidious role of the corporate world in shaping transgender ideology. I don't expect her to necessarily include SOGI 123. I think the omission of SOGI 123, I would say the omission of myself too, but I'm not going to get into an ego thing here. But the complete omission of SOGI 123 is curious. Okay, but again, I'm not going to say that she has to address those issues, but it would be, I would say, advantageous to the feminist cause if she would at least acknowledge somebody like me who is fighting against it. Right, just acknowledge that I exist. Right. So like I say, I've supported Meghan Murphy extensively, and that's why you saw that I signed that petition on her websites, because I've always sort of supported what she was doing. But she has not reciprocated, so she's not supported me in any way, in any written media form. She doesn't refer to me at all, and that's, normally that's might be not a big deal, but in this case, like I say, she's not willing to address corporate corruption and influence, and she's not willing to address SOGI 123. So, Like, if you understand what I'm talking about in terms of the dangers that this poses to women when they're conditioning these kids, you should at least mention somebody who is willing to address those issues. Now, I followed that for a couple of years and her not mentioning me, right? And I just sort of put up with it and put up with it and said, whatever, whatever, whatever. But when I really came under fire this year, around the time with UBC, and I had the sort of the entire media demonizing me. At that time, Meghan Murphy wrote an article on freedom of speech. Okay. And when I saw that she had written an article on freedom of speech when I was being besieged over this UBC issue, I thought, aha, finally, Meghan Murphy is going to mention me, right? After years, she's finally going to actually type my name. Well, when I read that essay on freedom of speech, she talked about the importance of freedom of speech and stuff. She, at one point in the essay, and this is a maddening point to me, she talks about the people on the right and how maybe feminists are too hard on people on the right and need to give them a chance. And she says, maybe you should give a chance to Stephen Crowder, for instance, or you should give a chance to Gavin McInnes, who might have something worth listening to. But at no point in the essay did she mention me. She did not mention that I, who's trying to stop the medical transitioning and brainwashing of our kids in schools and expose corruption in the science, at no point did she suggest that I, who lives in the same province, nobody should apparently give me a chance, right? No, they should give Gavin McInnes a chance. Gavin McInnes is a guy who, sorry to say, shoved a dildo up his behind while broadcasting on the web.
Are we going to have a president who's stiffer than someone with something up their ass? I'll have you know that I'm an alcoholic and I have the anus of a 70-year-old gay man. Here we go. I'm better than her with a butt plug up my ass.
So she will give a nod and tell people to give Gavin McInnes a chance and listen to Gavin McInnes, this clown, this far right-wing clown who shoves objects up his behind on the air, but she will not even mention my existence. So that's where my frustration with Meghan Murphy comes in. And it's not about bringing attention to me, okay? I am just somebody who is carrying an agenda. I'm somebody who's carrying something that I believe to be critically important. And that's why I want and would expect, certainly at the time I was under siege from UBC, I would have expected her, writing about freedom of speech, to mention the most censored person in British Columbia. That was me. Just maybe tell people that Jenn Smith exists, is trying to stop the transitioning of vulnerable children, and that maybe you should give Jenn Smith a chance. But she wouldn't do it. She would not even type my name, okay? And we had this person all over my Facebook criticizing me because I criticized Meghan Murphy over this very issue, right? And they said, now I'm banned, so I can't respond to that person, at least not for another week. But this person was saying, well, you should have gone to Meghan Murphy and tried to communicate with Meghan Murphy and get her on board. Well, the thing is that this person who dismissed me and then started slamming me all over social media was unaware that I did go to Meghan. Murphy. I've talked to Meghan Murphy more than once, but right after the free speech article, I went to Meghan Murphy and I said, hey, what about me and my cause? You didn't even mention me. How do you explain that, right? I live 45 minutes from you. I'm all over the media locally, and you can't mention me. You can't even type my name. Well, Meghan Murphy refused to discuss the issue. Okay. She basically said that when I said that Meghan Murphy doesn't support me and what I'm doing, and she sort of chimed in and said, oh, that's a load of rubbish and you're full of nonsense. Right. And then I sort of illustrated this whole thing where she's never typed my name and all of this. And then when it came to that, she said, well, I'm not going to argue with you online. And poof, she was gone. So I did try to go to Meghan Murphy. Right. But Meghan Murphy, for whatever reason, refuses to even acknowledge my existence. Okay. I don't want Meghan Murphy to put me on the stage with her. Right? She can put Ken Zucker on the stage with her. Ken Zucker is a big pharma apologist who was part of WPATH, who helped bring us this transgender insanity in the first place. So she's willing to platform him, but whatever, okay? I don't care. I don't need Meghan to platform me that way. What I would like is when she's talking about something like freedom of speech, particularly in the province in which we both live, right, that she will at least acknowledge my existence and maybe say something like, well, Jenn Smith's trying to get an inquiry into the mass transitioning of foster kids and autistic kids and stuff. Maybe people should give that a listen. Right? That's not platforming me, putting me on the stage with you talking and stuff, right? That's just acknowledging that I'm trying to do something that I regard as important. And Meghan Murphy refuses to, will not even type my name. And then people get mad at me because I'm frustrated with Meghan Murphy. They say, oh, you're evil. Meghan Murphy is a sainted queen, and she's the savior of us all. And how dare you question Meghan Murphy? That's the argument that's coming from the other side. But I've just sort of illustrated here that I'm trying to do something that Meghan Murphy is not focusing on, but something that is critically important. Okay, we've got young foster kids who are like me growing up, who are being confused and brainwashed by our system and led down this destructive path. I'm trying to do something important that she's not. The least she could do is acknowledge my existence, especially now that she's all over the media globally, right? She could help, but she doesn't want to help. Okay, don't help then. But for all of her supporters, right, don't get mad at me when I've decided that Meghan is not somebody that I'm going to say positive things about anymore. Okay, and I think it's only a little coincidental now that she's sort of aligned with this, what I call the Toronto cabal, the National Post corporate gang. That includes Jonathan Kay, his mother, Barbara Kay, Jordan Peterson, this whole sort of what I call official or approved opposition, right? So she's suddenly aligned with all of these people. And the National Post has tucked her under their warm, welcoming, and protective wing, right? But me, I've been totally silenced, and I get no help from people who claim to be interested and opposing the things that I've been working so hard trying to bring awareness to, right? I've been together with my, I've got one person helping me right now. We have sent information and notices and video to every politician in British Columbia and Alberta so far, and some federal politicians in Ontario, one by one, not mass emails, like one by one, communicating with all of these people. I've been going into debt doing this, right? Sort of bleeding myself out to try to bring attention to this issue and being attacked substantially. At least acknowledge my existence in some sort of written form, right? That would help what I'm trying to do. Forget about me. If you don't like me, you think I'm sort of some sort of transgender freak or something. If that's what Meghan thinks about me, that I'm, one of these transgender figures that she hates so much. Maybe she sees me as being the same thing as ogre. I don't know. Okay. So whatever your hatred of me is, put that aside and focus on what I'm trying to do. Right? Do you agree with what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to get an inquiry into what's happening with our most vulnerable kids. Okay. So if you support that, why won't you acknowledge it? Okay, so that's a thing that I want to, like, because I can't address it on Facebook right now because I'm banned, and I can't address it on Twitter either. Okay, so let's just look at this comment here. So she's a plant and doesn't acknowledge her voice because she's not truly fighting the agenda against the kids. Controlled opposition. Okay, so here's what I would say to that comment. Okay, I believe in a controlled opposition. This is a strategy that dates back to Vladimir Lenin in the USSR, actually. This idea that you understand that opposition to important government agendas and initiatives will arise. So you anticipate that ahead of time, infiltrate it where it arises, and try to control it. We saw this in the United States with some of the FBI's activities with the far right, and the fact that they, in some cases, were not only infiltrating these groups, but were controlling it. In at least one case, they were actually controlling one of these right-wing hate groups. So there is sort of overt controlled opposition like that. But I see what's happening in society more along the lines of Noam Chomsky's propaganda model. So it's like the way journalism has always been compared. You don't have to overtly control somebody like that. So people will have sort of limitations within themselves. So maybe Meghan doesn't address SOGI 123 because she thinks it's too much of a hot button subject and she'll get into too much trouble. So maybe she's afraid of addressing it. Or maybe she just understands that if she goes after it, that this is going to close all kinds of doors for her and the establishment's going to come against her. Same thing with the pharmaceutical industry and their corruption of some of the science and stuff. She's probably well aware that there's an awful lot of power in the pharmaceutical complex and that they could cause her a lot of trouble and stuff. So maybe just on her own, she doesn't touch those subjects. But that leaves her with a very narrow focus in this whole debate. And she doesn't have to be actually controlled. It's just that her narrow focus could ultimately serve and be used. That was Noam Chomsky's propaganda model. So he was talking to somebody from the BBC about the fact that the mainstream media was controlled.
How can you know that I'm self-censoring? How can you
I
know
don't say
that
you're
journalists
self-censoring. I'm sure you believe everything you're saying. But what I'm saying is if you believe something different, you wouldn't be sitting where you're sitting.
Okay, so you don't need to have an overt control. You just get, people who think that way can be maneuvered into positions where they will serve the agenda, right? There are people who are far right, pro-corporate, who subscribe to a dog-eat-dog view of the world. So they can, without being told what to do, just be put into positions that serve the agenda. Same thing with Meghan Murphy, I would say, is that she's a safe person to put in front of the media because she won't address SOGI. She won't address corruption in science and stuff. So she doesn't have to be overtly controlled, is what I'm saying. Because I believe we have intelligence assets working in the media and spinning public opinion, I need to get people to understand that this is not a conspiracy theory. It is based upon record source admitted actions by intelligence agencies. Okay, so that's what I'm working on next, to make people aware that you're living in a kind of information control matrix, where what you see on the news is only what the establishment wants you to see. So if somebody like Meghan Murphy or Jordan Peterson is all over the international media, they're there for a reason, because they serve the agenda in some way. And again, like I said, they don't have to serve it consciously. Meanwhile, me, who addresses pharmaceutical corruption and stuff, and addresses SOGI 123, I've been almost snuffed completely out of existence in terms of my ability to communicate. Yeah, so I don't want to. So I don't want to give. I don't know what Meghan Murphy's reason is for refusing to acknowledge my existence all this time, or what I'm trying to do. I don't know what her reasons are. Maybe she is controlled opposition. I don't know. She's certainly hanging out with the right crowd for that to be true, with the National Post and that. But I don't know. I wouldn't suggest that she is. What I would suggest is that there is some reason why she refuses to mention me. Right? Will that persist? I don't know. It's almost like a no-win situation for me, because everybody now is buying this idea that Meghan Murphy is the Joan of Arc of this opposition to the transgender agenda, and she's our the saint and the queen, and nobody can look cross-eyed at her. So it's hard for me to deal with that, because if I do look cross-eyed at her and say, well, wait a second, she's platforming Ken Zucker, who's a big pharma apologist, that's not a good thing. So if I look cross-eyed at her, well, then I've got everybody saying, how dare you question the queen, right? Even if I've got really good reasons for doing that. It's honestly, it's a no-win situation. I don't know what to do. So, I mean, I'm trying to clarify my position, and I hope my opposition is intelligible to people. I know it's not just out of spite or jealousy or anything. And then all I can do is just sort of leave it alone, I guess.